Hello, Lighthouse. On the highest rock of a tiny island at the edge of the world stands a lighthouse. It is built to last forever, sending its light out to sea, guiding the ships on their way. From dusk to dawn, the lighthouse beams. Hello, 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 lighthouse. The new keeper arrives to replace the old, to carry on tending the light. He polishes the lens and refills the oil and trims the burned end of the wick. Throughout the night, he winds the clockwork that keeps the lamp in motion. During the day, he gives the round rooms a fresh coat of sea green paint. He writes in the logbook and threads his needle and listens to the gathering wind. The wind takes a deep breath and blows and blows. Hello, hello, hello. The keeper boils water and drinks his tea. As he fishes for cod from the window, he sets the table and hums a tune and wishes for someone to talk to. Every few days he writes her a letter and throws it into the waves. He tends the light and writes in the logbook and waits for her reply. The sky grows dark and waves rise and crash. Hello, hello, hello. The keeper looks through his telescope. The tender arrives, bringing oil and flour and pork and beans. And his wife. He shows her around the round rooms of their house. He tends the light, writes in the logbook, and sets the table for two. The fog makes everything disappear. A bell must be rung to warn the ships. Clang, clang, clang. One thick night, disaster strikes. A boat is wrecked on the rocks. Not a moment to lose, the keeper rows out. He pulls 3 sailors from the deep black sea. He tends the light and writes in the logbook and wraps the sailors in blankets. The sea turns into a carpet of ice. Hello, hello, hello. One dawn, the keeper begins to sneeze. By dusk, he is terribly ill. His wife is everywhere all at once, running up and down spiral stairs. She tends the light and feeds him broth and chips ice off the lantern room windows. She sits by his side and writes in the logbook the minute his fever breaks. The icebergs pass on their journey south. The whales pass on their journey north.
Hello, hello, hello.
Inside the lighthouse, the woman walks around and around the room. Her husband boils water and helps her breathe in and out. He tends the light and writes in the logbook. And notes the birth of their child. The sky erupts in swirls of green. Hello, hello.
Hello.
The tender arrives, bringing oil and flour and pork and beans and the mail. Along with the fresh books and news from the land, there is an unexpected letter with the Coast Guard seal. The keeper winds the clockwork and polishes his lenses just as he's always done. He tends the light and writes in the logbook, but knows that it's not for long. Together they watch the horizon. The Coast Guard arrives with a brand new light and installs the machine to run it. No lamp to fill, no wick to trim, the keeper's work is done. He climbs to the top of the spiral stairs and closes the logbook for good. They pack their belongings into the boat and wave farewell to the gulls. Beyond the breakers, they all look up. Goodbye, Lighthouse. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. On the highest rock of a tiny island at the edge of the world stands a lighthouse. It is built to last forever, sending its light out to sea. The fog rolls in and the fog rolls out. The waves rise and crash. The wind blows and blows. Hello, hello, hello. Over the waves across the bay, a light on the land beams back. Hello, 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 lighthouse. About lighthouses. I used to think of lighthouses from the point of view of a ship. The faithful sentinel standing tall, beaming its light out to sea, warning of dangerous rocks, guiding sailors to safety. But one day I was at a flea market and an old print showing a cutaway interior of a lighthouse jumped out at me. The drawing made me think of what it would be like to live inside a lighthouse, to make my home in those tiny round rooms miles from land, all alone. I delved into research, looking at pictures, read books, visited museums, and climbed the towers of lighthouses from New York to Newfoundland. I learned that the keeper's job was to tend the light from sunset to sunrise, and to never, ever let it go out. Sometimes a keeper had an assistant, someone to play checkers with and help share the night watch. They did not always get along. One keeper and his assistant apparently annoyed each other so much that they went a year without speaking and ate all of their meals facing in opposite directions. Often families lived together on lighthouses. Some had as many as 11 children. Hundreds of women served as lighthouse keepers. Some replaced a husband or father, but many were appointed for the job. Several times during the night, the keepers would have to wake up and wind the clockwork that turned the lens. They would trim the burned ends of the wick and fill the lamp with oil, which they carried in a heavy bucket from the tank in the cellar all the way up the spiral stairs. They kept the lens free of dust so it would shine brightly, polishing the soot away each morning. Curtains were drawn on sunny days to prevent a fire in the lens. The lantern room windows had to be kept spotlessly clean. In winter, this meant chipping away ice, which was a dangerous job. The keepers held tight to special handles attached to the outside and sometimes tied themselves to the railing so they wouldn't be blown away in strong winds. In foggy weather, a signal was sounded to warn ships when the light would not be seen. In the early days, the keepers did this by hand, striking a bell with a hammer every 20 seconds, which would have been exhausting, not to mention loud. In time, these were replaced by clockwork bells, and in larger lighthouses, steam-driven foghorns. Some lighthouses keepers learned to sleep through the din of the horn. Others nearly went mad when the fog lasted for days. There was constant maintenance, keeping the saltwater and wind-battered lighthouse freshly painted, along with the usual household jobs: washing, cooking, mending, and stoking the coal stove. Water was pumped from the tank by hand. Waste from kitchen slops and chamber pots was thrown into the sea. Everything that happened had to be meticulously recorded each day in a logbook. Little things like the weather, how much oil was used, and which ships passed by, as well as big things like births, deaths, and shipwrecks. But even with all these daily chores, there was lots of spare time to fill. Keepers read books, played solitaire, knitted and embroidered, made model ships or tiny lighthouses to pass the quiet hours. Some keepers made kites to fly from the lantern gallery, or fished to supplement the tedious dinner of beans. Others brought seeds and stacks of dirt from the mainland to plant gardens in among the rock pools. Everything the keeper needed had to be brought from shore by a supply ship called a tender. The tender came every few months and brought the oil to run the lamp. It brought food to last a season, mostly canned and dried, and water in barrels for drinking and washing. Collected rainwater was never enough. The tender brought boxes of pencils and a new pair of socks. It brought the lighthouse. Don't do that, please. brought the Lighthouse Library one of many small cupboards stocked with books that made the rounds of all the lighthouses. The tender was the lighthouse keeper's contact with the rest of the world. It brought news from shore and letters from loved ones. The most important of these for the isolated residents of a lighthouse, it brought visitors, a doctor or the district inspector or even the keeper's spouse. The tender also took things away, such as a retiring keeper or letters home. For some, it was unbearable to wait months before sending and receiving mail, so they trusted their letters to the sea. One keeper at the Needles Lighthouse in Great Britain sent all his messages in bottles and estimated they took only 5 days to reach land. If the lighthouse was built on a rock or ledge, it wasn't possible for the tender to come too close. A small boat might be used to row ashore, or if the sea was too rough, a winch was used to haul supplies and visitors from the deck of the tender to the lighthouse and on a bosun's chair, a canvas seat attached to a rope that swung precariously above the waves, often drenching the passenger in the process. The lighthouse keepers devoted their lives to protecting ships at sea. They risked their lives to rescue shipwreck survivors. Many lost their lives in the attempt. Every lighthouse comes with stories of bravery and monotony, routine, and adventure. Electric lights began to replace oil lamps in the 1920s. Soon after, automated machines replaced clockwork, and the keeper's work was done. Lighthouses stand empty now, but the stories shine on. The lighthouse in this book is based on one I stayed in on a tiny island at the northern tip of Newfoundland, but as Herman Melville writes in Moby Dick, it is not down in any map. True places never are. The illustrations for this book were done in Chinese ink and watercolor on hot press paper. This book was edited by Susan Rich and designed by David Kaplan and Nicole Brown. The production was supervised by Erica Schwartz, and the production editor was Jen Graham. The text was set in Bulmer. Sophia Blackall has never met a lighthouse she didn't like. To make this book, she visited several, climbing spiral staircases, poring over keepers' logbooks, and gazing happily out lantern-roomed windows. She is the illustrator of many picture books, including Finding Winnie, the true story of the world's most famous bear, winner of the Caldecott Medal. She lives with her family in Brooklyn, New York, but keeps an eye on lighthouses for sale just in case.